So let's talk about meter, because this is really important. This helps you get into the flow of the music. So meter in poetry is the pattern of strong and weak beats. In music, meter's the pattern of strong and weak beats in each measure. So every measure will have a pattern of strong and weak beats. Now, most time signatures imply their meter, but do not state it outright. So in other words, what I'm going to teach you here, you're going to go, oh, well, this time signature has this meter. It's just sort of understood, right? It's not verbally said in the time signature. So let's look at 2/4. Let's start really easily. So the time signature 2/4 is 2 beats per measure, quarter note equals the beat. And the meter is saying 2 beats per bar. The first beat gets metric stress, and beat 2 is weak. Now the meter doesn't care what note value equals the beat. It's just saying there's 2 beats, and the first one's going to get a little stress. And to illustrate this, let me count 2/4 the way I would if I was just being fairly robotic. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. But as a musician, I would go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm putting a little bit more oomph to the first beat. And that's why I'm showing it there on the right-hand side as this big fat note, just to show that. It's not an accent, it's just a little bit of weight to it, okay? And this gives music its flow. In 3/4, the time signature says 3 beats per measure, quarter note equals the beat, but the meter is saying 3 beats per measure, the first beat gets metric stress, and beats 2 and 3 are weak. All right, so if I count this as a robot again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that's not very musical. But if I count it the way a musician would, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you can hear a waltz now, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? This is the meter. It gives you this flow. It's not just everything's even. 4/4, 4 beats in a measure, quarter note gets the beat. The meter says that the first beat will get the most metric stress. The third beat also gets metric stress, but not as much as beat 1. And beats 2 and 4 are weak. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're a musician, you feel this meter. And it helps you keep your place because one of the beats in the meter is getting a little bit more oomph to it. And so you feel that as it comes around. And a lot of other things happen. Harmonic change happens there. In rock and roll, one of the reasons why rock and roll is so addicting is because beat 2 and 4 are where the snare is. And so it's that little head jerk. And it gives it that kind of life because we're taking the weak beats and we're giving them a little bit more pop, right? Now, you may have noticed that all of the strong beats, the metrically stressed beats that we've looked at so far, were the first beat. And this is called the downbeat. The first beat of any measure is called the downbeat. And this is because the patterns that the conductor uses with the baton is to show beat 1, they go down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So they call it the downbeat. Used to be a jazz magazine. I don't know, maybe it still is. Now, let's move on, but before we do, we need to talk about 6/8. We need to talk about how beats are divided. Okay. So far, all the notes we've looked to have been equal to or larger than a beat. They've either been a quarter note, and all the time signatures we've had have been something for. And we've looked at half notes and whole notes, so they've been equal to or larger than the beat. So any value that is smaller than the beat is a division of that beat. Okay. Beats can be divided into 2 or 3 equal parts, so halves or thirds. If it's divided into 2 parts, the meter is called simple. And if it's divided into 3 parts, the meter is called compound. Now don't let these names trip you up. Compound doesn't mean anything. Why they call it that, I don't know. It makes it sound scary, but it's actually not. Okay, so simple beat division. Time signatures like 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4 are considered simple meters because their beats divide into 2 eighth notes. And I say eighth notes because notice it's all 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, so all quarter notes. So they're going to divide into 2 equal eighth notes. Okay, and this is an example of this in 2/4. So on the top we have the 2 beats represented as quarter notes. And then underneath it, we have the divisions as eighth notes. And if I was going to count this, I would count it as 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and is just a verbal thing that musicians use to keep their time, like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay, so you'll see here that the first eighth note, or the first half of the divided beat, is equal to the number of that beat, and then the second half is just and. So 1 and 2 and, okay? Now this is going to be true in 3/4. I'm changing the word and to an ampersand though, just to save some space here. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and again, the first half of the beat is numbered by its beat number, and the second half is just and. It's the and of the beat. And in 4/4, the same thing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And we can use this way of counting with the ands to help us play music that is smaller than a beat. Now, we're not going to look at this, but I'm just going to mention it here. If it gets divided into 4 rather than just 2, it's counted 1 E and a. This is, instead of 2 eighth notes, 4 sixteenths. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 1 E and a, 2 E and a. But I'm just throwing it out there. We're not going to deal with it, just in case somebody wanted to know. Now in cut time, this is how cut times, possibly a topic for another session. Is there any... Okay, so the question is there anything in the notation that defines the beats per minute? That's the tempo. Yeah, it'll say quarter note equals, and it'll have a number. I don't tend to do that in my music for students because I don't want to force them to play at a certain speed, because maybe they're not that ready yet for that speed, but they can play it slower. Or maybe they want to play it faster. But yes, there'll be a symbol. So like if you're in 4/4, quarter note, and it'll say equals, and it'll have a metronome number. And you set your metronome to that, and that's the tempo. So good question. Okay, so cut time. So in cut time, we have 2 beats per measure, and they're equal to half notes. So when you see the 4 quarter notes, now every other quarter note is an and. 1 and, 2 and. Or if you're having eighth notes, 1 E and a, 2 E and a. You're counting the same way, it's just that what you're counting is graphically represented by different notes. And you're not going to deal with 2/2 very much. There is some 2/2 in the Complete Guide to the Native American Flute. But it's a minority of the pieces in it, okay? Here's a song that has beat divisions in it, okay? So I can count this in 2 different ways. I'm just going to look at the first 2 measures here. I can count just the beats, and then when I get to the eighth notes, I can throw in and. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. That's one way I can do it. I prefer, if I'm needing to count this, to always count and, so that way my brain is ready for it when it happens. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And also when I get to a longer note, I don't accidentally make that note shorter, because I'm not filling in the space with the and that takes up time to actually say. Okay, you can do either way. It's the way I like to do it. Now I have to say this here, that if you're new to this and you're counting a lot, you may think, oh my God, am I going to have to do this all the time? And the answer is no. I could play this piece of music without counting at all. I can just see it and I know what it's going to be like, because I've done it so much. So over time, you won't have to be counting obsessively. But that being said, if I see a rhythm and it involves some really tricky figures that I've never encountered before, I might have to count it out until I get a feel for it, and then I can play it. Why don't we all clap and count this together? We'll do the first line. Let's do the whole first line, and I'm going to count the ands, okay? And I will give you a count of 3 and 4 and rather than the whole 4. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and 4 and. All right? Now if I play this, I'm just going to count the beats themselves, not the and. So 3, 4. Okay. Now, I'm not going to ask everybody to play this because the music itself, we've already kind of gone over what the notes mean. If this is something that's new to you, I would suggest you clap it out on at your own time. This is on this is in the handout on page 5. And if you're not familiar with this, clap and count 1 and 2 and clap and kind of get that sense. Maybe do 2 measures and then play it, and then put it down, 2 measures and then play it. Okay, this is the way all musicians learn. They take little bits at a time and then they keep going. Okay, let's look at another song here. I will clap this and count out loud. If you want to clap and count out loud with me, please do so. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and 4 and. Now, why would I count all 4 beats in that last measure? Because the note lasts that long. Even though I clapped the first time, I got to think, well, I got to hold that note for that entire length of time. Let me play this in G. If you want to play along, that's great, but you don't have to. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let's go back to dotted notes because now we're getting to get 6/8. So in this case, we're looking at a dotted 8th quarter note in the bottom line. Now these 2 pieces of music are exactly the same. The top line, I tie a quarter note to an 8th note, so it lasts for a quarter note plus an 8th note, or 3 8th notes. And in the bottom line, instead of tying it to the note, I put a dot on it because a dot equals half of the value of the note that it's attached to. So half of a quarter note is an 8th note. So that's 3 total 8th notes because the quarter equals 2 plus the extra 8th. All right? So if I was going to clap either of these examples, you can look at either one. I'll do it twice, maybe if you want to start at the top line and then go to the bottom line. You'll hear that what I'm going to clap will be exactly the same. Okay, so 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and 4 and. They're exactly the same. And the reason why dots are used because it's much easier to look at. It's far less confusing. So the thing I want to stress here is that a quarter note with a dot equals 3 8th notes. That's the thing I want you to take away from this. Okay? Because as we flip to the next slide, we're going to talk about compound beat division. So time signatures like 3/8, 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8 are considered compound meters because their beats divide into 3 8th notes. And how does that work? Well, the beat in these time signatures is equal to a dotted quarter. And what is a dotted quarter when you break it apart? 3 8th notes. So 3/8 or 6/8, 9, it's kind of a little bit misleading. They really don't mean what they say. Yes, it truly is 3/8 notes, but the meter is saying there's one beat in this measure and it's equal to a dotted quarter note. Okay, and you would count it 1 and So if I was just going to clap the beat and then count the eighth notes, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and So I'm clapping on the dotted quarter and then playing and counting those 3/8 notes beneath it. Okay, so 3/8 notes, a dotted quarter equals the beat. It's divided into 3/8 notes. And the eighth note that falls on the beat is the beat number 1, and then are the next two eighth notes. So how many beats are in 3/8? If you say 1, you are correct. It's one beat in 3/8. It's a dotted quarter note. Okay. So in 6/8, we get 2 dotted quarter notes, and we know now that in these time signatures, the dotted quarter note is equal to the beat. So we count this 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and same thing as 3/8, only you're doing it twice, right? Now I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a mouthful. And if I did, I would have to put metric stress on the first and fourth eighth note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But musicians don't do that. They go 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and because this is considered to be not 6 beats. So how many beats are there in 6/8? If you say 2, you would be correct. There are 2. And each beat is equal to a dotted quarter note. Now a lot of people think that 3/8 and 3/4 and 6/8 are have a lot in common because they have 3 of these little pulses inside them. But actually you should look at 6/8 more like 2/4. Because in 2/4 there's 2 beats, but they're represented by 2 different things. One's a quarter note, and in 6/8 it's a dotted quarter note. And in 2/4, the beat gets divided into 2 equal parts, where in 6/8, it gets divided into 3 equal parts. That's why we have to make it a dotted quarter note. Now I could sit here and clap 1, 2, and I could count back and forth. 1 and 2 and 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 what's the common thing here? 2 beats. It's just a question of how I'm dividing it. I'm either dividing it in 2 equal halves or 3 equal thirds. Okay. Now, here's a piece in 6/8. Now, when I play this, hopefully you're going to hear, oh, that sounds cool. I know what that sounds like. I understand this in my ear. Okay. So let me play this first, and then we'll break it down. Okay. I'm going to play it in A, in case you're wondering. There's more to the song that's on playing. Now, if you were me, you're tapping your foot twice in each bar. Ba da da ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da. Because there's 2 beats in each measure. And the eighth notes are subdividing it, right? So if I was going to clap this, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and make sense? I hope it does. I know this is tricky, but when I play it, hopefully you also can hear, oh yeah, I know what that sounds like, okay? So let's play the first line in A, and I'll take it kind of slow, and I'll count with the ands. So, and I'll give you, would a beamed eighth note be considered a triplet? No, a triplet would have a 3 underneath it. Triplets are when you want to put 3 equal eighth notes in a simple meter, where it should be only 2, and you want to put 3. Then you put a 3 underneath it, and that's called a triplet. But I don't want to get into that, okay? This is actually in the meter. These are the way it is, okay? So here we go. I'm going to count the full 2 beats and give you the ands. 1 and 2 and There's not much to the finger of the song. You're just going 5, 4, 3, 5, 5, 4, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 1, then back up, right? Let me do that again in G. I'll do it a little slower too. Here we go. 1 and 2 and okay. And let me play the rest of the song. It's the same rhythm, right? I hope you can hear this meter has this bump, 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 this kind of swingy feel to it. Okay. So let's talk about some other musical symbols. This is pretty quick and pretty straightforward. Repeat signs. So repeat signs are a double bar line with dots, and they face each other, the two dots. So what would happen is if you're playing into a section that has repeat signs, in this case you have 4 measures, you would come from the left-hand stuff, the material that precedes it, and you'd go into the section between the 2 repeat lines. You'd go to the second repeat line, the one that faces back to the front of the music, and then you would jump back to the first repeat sign, then you'd play it over again, and then keep going. So that's what a repeat sign looks for. Now, there's a couple things you should know. If the repeat is to jump back to the very beginning of the song, there usually isn't a right-facing repeat sign at the beginning of the song. They just know, well, you can't go any farther back than that, so you got to start there, okay? And it's not uncommon, too, that a repeat sign, you play it once, and then that's the end of the song. So instead of going on like the red arrow does, it just stops. Fermata. Everybody's seen these. Everybody knows them. It tells the player to hold the note at their discretion for the length of time. In my opinion, these are overused for the NAF, and it's a sign that the composer really couldn't make up their mind how long to hold it, or doesn't really understand time and how long to actually notate that music. Does that make sense? So if you're writing your own music, try to avoid fermatas. They just look like you're being wishy-washy. I rarely see them in the music that I play. As we talked about before, this is a breath mark, a comma that's put between 2 notes. Sometimes they look like little slashes, sometimes they might be little check marks. They look differently, but this is pretty common. A common comma. And this is at the discretion of the composer or the arranger. You don't have to do it, and you can breathe in other places too. It's just them saying, well, here's a good place. Okay? But if your breath won't hold for that long, take a breath. This is a trill. You'll see this too. It's an alternation of this note with the note above it, depending upon the scale. So if I'm just playing a song with the minor pentatonic, I'm going to trill with the next note up in the minor pentatonic scale, which is the 7. If I'm playing something that has a 6 in it, I'm going to trill with that 6, if it's in the song. Okay. How long is the trill? For as long as the note is, that's a good question. That was on a half note, so you'd hold it for a half note. The trill would be held to the length of the note that it's attached to. This is a grace note. I talked a lot about these in my embellishment course, so if you want to know more about them, I highly advise that you get access to that. So grace note indicates an embellishment, and it's a smaller note with a slash through it usually, and it indicates which note or fingering you should play for that embellishment. And they're played fast, light, unaccented, and before the beat of the main note, right? So, and again, I've got a whole 2 hours on that. Staccato, this is a dot over a note, and it indicates that the note should be played detached. Staccato is Italian for detached. Really what this means is the note should be separated or detached from the next note following it. It doesn't mean fast. So this is staccato, not, which is how most people interpret it, right? One rule of thumb or general guideline is that you play the note for half of its value. So a half note with a staccato would be held for a quarter note. That's kind of a general rule. It's not necessarily the way people always play. So it doesn't mean fast and aggressive. It just means detach it from the note that follows. And just use your taste into the music that you're playing, what it should really sound like. Tenuto is the opposite. It's Italian to hold. So it tells the player, hold this note for its full value and maybe give it a little bit more oomph, kind of sit on it a little bit more. And then the mixture of that is a tenuto staccato, and it's telling you, well, play staccato, but not as fast as you might normally without the line. Okay. Accent, a greater than symbol or right pointing chevron tells the person to accent the note. And they're tricky in the NAF because if you accent a note, it can cause it to blow out. Too much air in the windway. So I don't tend to write music with accents on them because in the NAF they're kind of hard. Here's another sort of trick to help you. A lot of times beats are put together with beams. So all of these here represent one beat. You have two quarter notes, two eighth notes, an eighth note and two sixteenths, a dotted eighth and a 16th, an eighth, and then a 16th. And they're grouped together to help you see them very quickly. So how many beats do we see in this example? We see 4, right? And so it helps you as a musician to see the beat, just like if you look at some of the songs that I handed out, like in Stepping Stones, the eighth notes are paired together on a beat, or they're paired together as 4 over 2 beats. We're getting to that in a second. Or in Light and Shadow, the 3/8 notes in the 6/8, they're beamed together to show that's under a beat. Helps you see the beat really clearly. Now, going to beams, there's some beaming rules, and you should know these if you're writing music, and it helps you interpret too. In simple division, like 4/4, beams may include more than one beat. And in 3/4, I've seen them sectioned off into beat 1, beat 2, and 3, and I've also seen it go all through the entire measure. Just depends. But beams in even number measures, like 4/4, do not go across the middle of a measure. So the left-hand side here shows how it is. You can clearly see where beat 3 is. Whereas where the X is on the right-hand side, it's very hard to see the third beat. It's sort of muddled up there. So they don't do it. Okay? This is like, if we go back to this piece written in 1644, there's no beams. They couldn't do beams because each thing was a separate piece of wood that was set under this frame, right? So if I try to look at the last measure, I finally figured out it's tricky to read that. There's 4 beats in that measure, but it's hard to see. This also is true with 6/8 because it's an even measure. There's 2 halves to it. So the beam would break it apart on the second half of it. It wouldn't go all the way through. Same thing with ties. Tie usually in the middle of a measure to show you where the third beat is in 4/4. So if you look at these 2 measures and you play them, they are exactly the same. The person listening to you would not know that they looked any different. But that example on the right is very strange. You can't even see the third beat. It's buried in that second quarter note. So it's better to notate things and you'll see it more this way. And that if you see a time and we'll measure and you're like, well, why are they doing that? That's why. Okay. This is true in 6/8 as well. So we want to show the middle of the measure by tying to the quarter note, which is at the beginning of the 4th 8 note or the second dotted quarter note, not the example on the right. And then finally, this indicates the end of a piece, fine. And that's the end of our presentation.